Welcome, everybody, to another episode of The Nonprofit Show. We're super, super excited because we have josh-gryniewicz from Odd Duck. You gotta love that. And we're going to be talking about narrative frameworks and how we can work them into our campaigns and what we need to be doing that. So many of us in the nonprofit sector, this is that golden hour where we start really working towards launching our campaigns for the end of the year, holiday seasons, all of that. And so this is really going to be a great conversation with Josh. Before we get going, in case we haven't met, I'm Julia Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. Jarrett Ransom, my trusty sidekick, is out for a couple days. She'll be back next week. And then hint, hint, I'll be gone. But that's neither here nor there. We want to make sure we thank all of our presenting sponsors. Without them, we would not be here as we are day in and day out as we march towards our 600th episode. I know, it blows my mind. That makes me 600 days older, Josh, than when we started this whole thing. So we want to give a big shout out to Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, your part-time controller, nonprofit nerd, fundraising academy at National University, staffing boutique, and nonprofit thought leader. And again, if you've missed any of our back episodes or you want to see this episode again today or share it with somebody else, you can find us on Roku, YouTube, Vimeo, Amazon Fire TV, and now on podcast. So you can queue us up wherever you like to get your streaming content. You can take us along for your ride into the office when you're running, exercising, housekeeping, whatever. But we want to be there with you. So check us out on our podcast. Okay, Josh-Gryniewicz, I love the name Odd Duck.
Thank you.
Because I have felt like an odd duck in my life and
Yes,
continue
yes,
to.
yes.
What does this mean? What is this work that you do?
Sure. So I could actually start with the name Odd Duck because I spent a lot of my career. I'm extremely ADD, and so I spent a lot of my career, kind of being odd man out, or a little freakish in the best possible way. And I think when I launched my own agency, the idea was to let my freak flag fly openly, and so that's why the name of Odd Duck. But we are, and answer your question, Julia, we are a storytelling for social change consultancy. We focus primarily on the population health and mental wellness space, and we do three areas of work within that. The first is strategic storytelling, which is probably what we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about today. The second is actual content development. So we do everything from narrativizing curriculums, gamifying curriculums, to collecting oral histories, whether that's video, audio, written, or multimedia oral history projects, and a whole bunch of content development in between, both fiction and nonfiction. And then the third is doing training and technical assistance in this space, whether it's helping community-based organizations to navigate the ubiquitous sort of misinformation that's out there right now, or helping thought leaders and thinkers in various spaces to TEDify their talk and get ready for kind of presenting on the TED stage or something along those lines. So that's the broad range of what we do.
Okay, so my new word of the day, TEDify. Oh my God, I love that. Because I'm gonna TEDify that. That's awesome. Because you said that and I was like, I totally knew what you meant.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we even when I'm working with my clients, we talk about, we have micro stories, which are usually your 30-second snapshot. We do these all the time. every day, around the water cooler and so on. Then we have your anecdote, which is a little bit longer, maybe about 30 seconds to a minute, sometimes up to 3 minutes. And then, we talk about your story, and that's the tedified one, which is usually 7 to 12 minutes. You get a little bit into your history, into your personal experience, into your background, your founder story, and so on. And share that. So that's usually how we kind of conceptualize these units of storytelling.
Before we get in much deeper, I love how you segmented this off, because I feel like if we could enforce that to our C-suite and our board members and our volunteers,
Yes,
then we could actually amplify the story of our work and create more interest in our nonprofits, because it's that you don't know, like when you go to pick up your dry cleaning, that you have an opportunity to engage somebody in the story of your work and in the story
absolutely.
of your passion, or the story of community need. And so I love that you've taken that into that kind of framework, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I have to be on the TED stage in order to be successful, but
Absolutely.
you just rope this back around. That's really
That's
cool.
Yeah, I mean, for us, Julia, it was really about, so we look at this is our theory of change, right? So we look at everything and through a narrative lens. And I don't know about you, but I don't remember the last time I pitched anybody in an elevator. So so for us, it was like, well, how do we get those little units of micro story where you're talking to the dry cleaner, or you're talking to the barista at Starbucks, or you're talking to whomever who might not want to hear all of your how you got involved in the issue in the first place, and when you were 6 you were daydreaming about that, and they're like, okay, buddy, keep it moving, right? So so this is why, and when we do a narrative framework, we really take that kind of consecutive sort of concentric ring model, and we build out, like, here's your 25-word version, which should be around 30 seconds. Here's your 50-word version of the story. Here's your 100-word, and then here's your extended narrative. So when you're sitting down and you have somebody who's sitting across from you at a table and wants to hear everything that you have to share, like, you can go in depth and elaborate and riff on things and follow tangents and still stay focused on the main issue at hand.
Okay, I think we need to end this episode right now, because I want to go back to my office and I want to sit at my desk and I want to do something with that ring,
Yeah,
because I find myself getting challenged. How do I cram this all down? And then
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
this, like, you got to speak faster. You got to speak faster. It's like, no, you got to be more thoughtful. Wow. Okay. So you've like blown my mind. Let's,
Awesome, thank
I
you.
know that's a really, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
Tedify and then circles of the story. Okay, I'm there.
yeah,
So
yeah.
let's talk about this narrative intersection. If you're trying to
Sure.
marry these rings or have them be a logical, I'm thinking of like a rock hitting a pond and you have those rings. You go,
That's
wow.
exactly it. That's how we conceptualize it.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
talk about these things, because this is
yeah.
a really, it's so logical, but I don't know why we don't do this enough.
And it's so it is, and so what we say is, if you start in the outermost ring, so usually we
Okay.
talk about these concentric rings. We use 6 separate layers or units of storytelling. The outermost ring is meta narrative, right? So
Okay.
meta narrative is intersecting narratives that really are sort of the operating system of culture, of society as a whole.
Okay.
Um, and you could think of anything from health inequities to systemic racism to innovation and creativity, and how we conceptualize those are all narratives that kind of perpetuate and keep things operating the way they are, the status quo. And how they intersect is usually those meta narratives. Then when we're dealing with organizations, you also have another layer of what we refer to as lore. So that's the internal organizational stuff. What people are saying about the executive director, how the board represents the issues, the causes, and what they're passionate about, and so on. So what we say, Julia, is that those 3 outer rings, you can't just go head to head with them. You can't go toe to toe with them and disrupt them because they're just way too big for any one person, any one organization, any one campaign, period. So how do we actually shift? How do we move the needle on those? That's where those three inner concentric rings are. So you have your micro story, your anecdote, and your story. And each one of those is like if story is currency, that's how we're getting buy-in, and then we're disrupting those meta narratives, uncoupling them and disrupting them. And so that's our theory of change overall. And then the slide that you just showed, which is really what we build is a scaffolding, a framework for how to structure all of those narratives, talking to the audience that's most important. Because as you're probably aware in the work that you do, if you're trying to message to everyone, you're messaging to no one at all.
No one. Yeah.
Period. So you have to determine who are your audiences, who are the ones who are going to help you make the change that you want to have happen in the world, and then what are the questions they're asking. So if you distill their entire persona, who they are, their way of looking at the world down to single questions that orient to those narratives, then how do you address or answer those questions and disrupt that overall narrative that they're carrying around? And that's how we came up with the concept of narrative framework in the first place.
I love this because it gives everybody permission to be a little bit briefer, and then also be more strategic in thinking about how it works.
That's right. It's all about strategy too. It's strategic storytelling. So the first thing that we do when we're leading workshops, when we're taking people through the narrative framework process, is we figure out what is your objectives. So a lot of times, especially in communication, especially in nonprofit communication, folks come in and they have tactics or strategies in mind for what they want. But we want to get on the TED stage, right? We want a New York Times article. Okay, everybody does. And we want an audience with Oprah. So if we could get those three things, we're done. And it's like, okay, great. But let's take a step back. What do you want to do with the attention? What do you want to do with that once you get in that New York Times and the phone's blowing up? Right? What do you want when you're sitting down with Oprah? What do you actually want? What? So let's start there first, and then we'll build in the tactics, we'll build in the strategies, we'll figure out those other pieces. But let's start with what are you actually trying to accomplish? And it doesn't have to be like explicitly cause related. It can be internal things, infrastructure issues. We want to build up this department, or we're getting into food distribution now. We've never been into food distribution before, and so we really need the apparatus internally to actually be able to manage all of those pieces. So those could be the objectives that you're trying to and then that you're trying to communicate, and then we figure out, well, okay, what are the things that are actually going to make those happen? And so first, who are the audiences that are going to help you achieve success, and then what do they need to hear from you? Right? And so we build an entire story map. That's the core of a narrative framework, is a story map, which maps out your core audiences, what they're telling themselves or what they subscribe to now about the issue, about the concept, about whatever, and then what they need from you as an organization to help you get to the outcomes that you want, whether that outcome is fundraising or anything.
Yeah, building community support. Okay, so part and parcel of this, I'm like totally now an Odd Duck groupie. I'm like gonna totally get in. I'm all in with this. I'm so fascinated because a lot of what you're talking about is cultural.
That's
Like
right.
how we communicate and how we think about communication. So talk to us about big culture and little culture. I'm fascinated to hear about
Oh,
this.
thank you. So big culture, culture with a capital C, right, is what we live and breathe in all the time. So that's how we go around. So a lot of this is modeled off of a literary theorist who did the first evolutionary analysis of literature. So what is the psychological, social, and anthropological needs from an evolutionary perspective that story and play and all of that serve our species, right? And I'll just ask, because I asked this in my question. So if it's okay, Julia, I'll just ask you, what do you think it is? And I will say that I would have, if I didn't know this, answer this question wrong.
Well, sure. I think it's about, so I think, believe it or not, I'm a geek. I think about this type of a question a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah.
And I think ultimately it comes down to ego and place. And I think it has to do with longevity. How long do I survive on this planet?
Interesting. Interesting. Yes. So that's not too
That's
far
not it.
well, it's close though. So where I would start is I would say, oh, story serves meaning making. It's a meaning making purpose. That's what I would argue and articulate. I would be wrong. So it does do that. It does serve that. But for the species as a whole, and this is where you are totally on point. For the species as a whole, story serves for social cohesion.
Yeah.
So when
Yeah.
everybody in a culture is collectively bought into a story, right? They're willing to do things for that story. That becomes the vision that they want to bring into reality, and they're committed to it, right? So that's the
Yeah.
big
Yeah.
culture. And we can think of all sorts of big culture, big C stories that we subscribe to for culture at large. And I like to say, if it does that for the species, imagine what it can do for your organization, for your
Hell
community-based
yeah.
group, or for your nonprofit, right? And so it's all creating and bringing into alignment in the same way you have those concentric rings, all of the narratives that you're trying to share into a strategic framework.
Okay. I got to say this really quickly, and then I want to know about
Yeah.
little culture. I serve on a board, and we just launched a big a big promotion program, whatever,
Sure.
for our community called Social Cohesion Dialogues.
Oh,
And I'm not making this up.
wow.
And
Wow. Yeah.
it has to do with social justice.
Yeah.
And so the concept is that we all have prejudice and bias, and we have all these things that we don't know about. But if we are able to talk, and
Yeah.
if we're able to discuss things and hear different stories and point of views,
Yeah.
we build a stronger society.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
it's really an interesting
Absolutely.
thing. I mean, you said that, and I was like, holy crap,
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. That's it.
that's really
And
really awesome.
in that conceptualization is perfect, Julie, because there are so many misconceptions or misunderstandings of that broader narrative that we have around social justice, that we have around race, that we have around safety and security and public safety, and all of that feeds into, that's where those meta narratives come from. So then those are where they couple up, and a lot of times it's like the individual narratives are, like there are racial components to it, there are justice components to it, there are social justice components to it, there are legal issues, and those all kind of feed together. And it's like, how do you define those narratives first, and then do exactly what you're saying, like get everybody together to have some cohesive conversation and arrive at some of the same shared solutions in a shared space.
I love it. I love that shared
Yes.
solutions and shared
Yes.
space. So Josh, then so that's big culture. Now little culture, how do you see that playing out?
Yeah, yeah. So little culture is really like, what can, so the organization or organizations that are driving this initiative that you just shared, right? What can they do to sort of harmonize and advance a cohesive narrative that sort of disrupts these existing narratives, right? And so a lot of it, when we go back to narrative framework, a lot of times we're working with organizations to say, how do they tell their story? How do they get this out in the world? And, we shared, you had the slide teed up, but what we look at, is kind of concentric. If you picture like a Venn diagram, right? And you have each of those concepts. So you have your concept branding, and you have your messaging framework, and you have your organizational change or change management piece. Right in the middle of that, the connective tissue between all three of those is narrative, right? And
Yeah,
what
yeah.
often happens, and I know I've worked on campaigns like this in the past, but what often happens is, you get your branding right, and you get your messaging right, and you say, okay, well, this is so beautiful, and we've got this new logo, and once the new logo is out everywhere,
Let's go.
everybody's gonna just fall in line. And like, what we forget two things. One, we forget like how change is hard. Change is hard at any level, right? And so we forget that, like, when we're making this change, sometimes we're not thinking of all of the people who are backing the organization, who are part of the organization, from like, the frontline workers and staff and social workers and so on, all the way up to the board members. And how do we harmonize them and get all of them on board so that it's not just an externally facing campaign or not just an externally facing rebrand, but that everybody is, pulling from the same playbook, right?
Love that.
And telling the same story. So that's where that concept comes from. And when we talk about, lowercase little culture, right, it's all about getting the organization harmonized first. So, you can go out and you can make all sorts of changes in the world, in the grand scheme of things, disrupting, big C culture, but you're most effective when you have complete alignment of your organization, your little C culture, right?
Wow, Josh, I love that you brought this up because I don't think and you probably can amplify this, but I don't think we do that. I don't think we ever think about our own teams. And again, it's, that phrase, preaching to the choir. I
Right.
don't need to preach to the choir.
Right.
They're here every Sunday. They know what I'm going to say, and
Yeah.
they're going to say it. Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily. We need to start, with our own teams so that then they
That's
can
right.
go out and evangelize and just,
That's right.
move it forward. So that's a cool thing. I appreciate that you brought that up because it kind of sets things it sets things in a little bit of a different way. And what I hear you saying is you got to back up, start testing, working with your own teams and your own
Exactly.
people before you go
Exactly.
out into the community.
And I would even say, take it a step further, Julia. Like for us, when we've been most effective, it's when the staff member who's been in an organization for 20, 25 years,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like suddenly sees that 25 years of history contributing to where they're going in the future. So maybe the organization has a new name, it has a new identity, it has a new logo, everything is aligned and ready for this campaign. But how does that, 25 years of history inform,
Yeah.
that new direction that the organization is going?
Right.
Right. And so
Yeah.
that's what we're talking about here. And you're 100% right. And I know that I've been guilty of it before, in organizations and positions before. It's, oh, well, my team's going to fall in line. I mean, how can they not? Like, this is a beautiful logo. How can they not love this logo?
Yeah.
This is an amazing, like, we're doing such great work. How could they not be aligned with this? And then when you actually have these conversations, when you slow things down enough to engage your entire team and bring them up to speed, you recognize that there is often a lot of fear and anxiety about just the change in general. And so the beautiful new logo is great, but how does that speak to me? I've put in all of this energy into this old organization. And so so it's bringing them up to speed and making sure that their story, their history, their personal experience is incorporated into the future direction of the organization.
Okay, I love this. And I'm totally, yeah, I'm gonna move to Chicago next week and join your team. Yeah,
You are welcome.
I don't know how I'm gonna function in the winter, but I'm gonna show up on your doorstep. Now, so much of what you've been sharing with us today, Josh, is a very logical, strategic approach
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
storytelling and the narrative. But at the end of the day, we do have emotional things that we're dealing with.
That's
And I
right.
think we can exploit them. We can, sometimes have a problem that's so overwhelming
That's
that you
right.
can say, my $1, my $10, my $1,000,000 will never change the situation.
Right.
So how do we blend emotion and storytelling and make it effective and not a pity party or just
That's right.
something that overwhelms us?
So what I would say, the first thing that I would say to that, Julia, is that for us, we spend a lot of time when we're doing these story maps, when we're doing the narrative framework, we spend a lot of time in what we call tone. So what we say in these trainings in the narrative framework is what often how you say something is just as important, if not more important at times, than what you're actually saying. And that's that emotional tone, right? Because how it's received, everybody is bringing into their engagement with a story, engagement with another person, engagement with an organization, engagement with an institution, engagement with, you know, a university, whatever.
Yeah.
They're bringing in their own emotional baggage. They're bringing in their own experience. We're seeing this play out around COVID, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like, you know, we since the pandemic started, we've worked on a number of campaigns with community-based service providers, you know, around, you know, adoption of, you know, different, whether it's the safety protocols or, economic interventions or so on, right? And the thing is, you know, people are understandably scared. You know, what happens when you're moving from a space of fear, you're often even in your personal life, you're not making the most rational decisions. So you're not processing information. And there's this whole push of like, well, you know, if people just knew the facts, or if people just had the science behind this, they would understand it would be. And it's like, no, we have to focus on the emotion first. We have to create a safe space where somebody can actually feel comfortable sharing what their concerns are, expressing their fears. You know, same with like the social cohesion. You know, that's another issue that's very charged. You know, that's very like when you're talking about, you know, public safety, you're talking about, you know, years and years and years of state sanctioned oppression, right? And abuse. Like there's a lot of emotion there. And so you have to actually, before you can even again interject or disrupt, you know, the narratives that exist, you have to create a space for emotions to be expressed and you know, be felt. And then you have to deliver in a tone that resonates or harmonizes with, you know, the where folks are at after they've cleansed the palate, so to speak. You know, to meet them where they are and to deliver a story that's, you know, in tone, in tune with where their thinking is.
Wow. Okay. So you've like super engaged me and blown my mind. Literally, I'm thinking I need to like come to Chicago and become one of your
Let's do
acolytes.
it. Let's hang out. Yes,
Oh
come
my
to
God.
Chicago.
Because you're
Yes.
speaking my love language. I mean, I think this is just, you know, we go, Josh, by this notion that there are 1.8 million registered nonprofits in this great country of ours that has nonprofits because we have problems, right?
Yeah.
So, and things that we want to solve and opportunities. And so we have a lot of competition for time and money and motion and
That's right.
action. And so, um, what you've been talking about with us today is just at the core of so much success and opportunity. No matter what it is your nonprofit is trying to do,
Right.
it really, this is, I think, one of those foundational discussions. It's been such a pleasure to get to know you across the wires, as they say. Josh Grenonwitz, founder and narrative strategist of Odd Duck. I want to be on your flock, my friend, because
birds of a feather.
birds of a feather, man. You're totally talking my language.
Awesome.
I just am so interested in this, and I think you've really taken us on a journey of re-examining this narrative, because so many of us we are, especially this time of year, as you know, Josh, campaign, get us ready. We, you know, printing the new landing page, you know, and it's like, wait a minute, let's rethink this. So really cool to hear your message. I'm really impressed, and I'm going to have to digest some of this. Tedify, super cool word.
Thank you.
Those concentric circles of how we navigate the depth and the breadth of what we're trying to communicate, as opposed to one thing and trying to all get it out there. I loved that. Really interesting concepts that I think we can all share and gain from. So it has been an amazing time. I told you that it would go by fast. It has.
Yeah, it really did. It really did. Wow.
I know it went fast for me. Again, I'm Julia Patrick. My co-host Jarrett Ransom will be back with us next week. Again, we want to thank all of our presenting sponsors. This is why I come to work every day, to have these discussions with these amazing thought leaders around our great planet. And so, Josh Grenonwitz, you have been just fabulous. And you are here thanks to Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, your part-time controller, nonprofit nerd, fundraising academy at National University, staffing boutique, and the nonprofit thought leader. What a magical way for me to start my day. For some of you viewers, you're maybe doing lunch or ending your day, but this has been really amazing. Josh, thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Appreciate it.
It has been great. Hey, as we end every episode of the Nonprofit Show, we want to remind our viewers, our listeners, ourselves to stay well so you can do well. We'll see you back here tomorrow, everyone.